David Smith would later describe Saddleworth Moor, a place forever associated with Ian Brady and Myra Hindley, as hell's garden, an abyss where devils play and souls can never rest. I hate the place of a passion. And today we will hear how David Smith was drawn into the horrifying world of Brady and Hindley. Today's story begins in Hattersley in the northwest of England. It's about 10 miles east of Manchester city centre. As the door shut behind 19-year-old David Smith, he had to make a conscious effort not to sprint the short distance home in the darkness. He was just so shocked at what he had just witnessed. Moments later, once his front door was shut, he felt reassured by the normality of the greeting from his collie Bob and the sound of his wife Maureen filling the kettle. David told Maureen that he would head out to the phone box at daybreak when others were about, and not in darkness, as he was terrified that Myra Hindley and Ian Brady would see what he was doing calling the police, and then who knows how they may react. David, Maureen and Bob left the house early that next day, and David's 999 call was logged at 6:07 a.m. by the duty policeman at nearby Hyde Station. After telling the officers what had happened the night before, David was driven to Brady and Hindley's house, where they lived with Hindley's grandma, to see both Brady and Hindley handcuffed and being led away by officers. The terrible sight of the dead body was discovered upstairs, just where David had told officers that he and Brady had left it the night before. Brady was charged with murder that day, but Hindley was released, and her parents picked her up from the police station to enjoy her last days of freedom before she too was arrested and charged with murder. Let's go back. David Smith suffered a terrible childhood with violence and sexual abuse. He was a troubled child, unable to control his anger. He was expelled from school for punching the headmaster, and was soon in a youth detention centre after fighting. David was a good-looking teenager, and on his release there were many girlfriends, but one who he met hanging around the street corners with teenagers of his age became special to him. Her name was Maureen Hindley. She was a couple of years older than David. Maureen too had experienced a very difficult childhood. She was very close to her sister Myra, despite the fact that Myra lived with her grandma, whereas Maureen still lived at home with their alcoholic dad and their mum, who had a violent relationship. But make no mistake, Myra was the absolute boss in this family, and she sorted out any issues her younger sister was having either at home or elsewhere. In 1963, David left school, and unsurprisingly, he fell into making money through burglary and petty crime, but he wasn't a great criminal, and he was soon caught. On the 8th of July 1963, he appeared in court, but was treated with leniency and given just 3 years probation, whilst his mates were sent to prison. This was big news in the local area, but a week later, there was even bigger news. David's 16-year-old neighbour, Pauline Reed, suddenly vanished. David had a very soft spot for Pauline. He used to sit with David when he was waiting for his dad to come home, and she would bring him tea and jam sandwiches. But on the 12th of July, she left home to attend a dance at a local social club, but she hadn't been seen since. And then 1 month later, 12-year-old John Kilbride, the eldest of 7 children, also went missing. But despite all the efforts of the police, John, like Pauline, could not be found. One evening shortly after this, Maureen told David that she was pregnant. Both were delighted. Despite difficult starts in life, they were keen to build a stable family, and they told their families their plans for the rest of their lives together, including an upcoming wedding, even though David was only 16 and Maureen was 18. But before they had the chance to get married, another child went missing in the local area, 12-year-old Keith Bennett. Is there a picture in the history of UK true crime more haunting than this one of Keith? He left home with his mum to join his siblings at his grandma's house. His mum helped him cross a busy road before going back home, but Keith never made it to his grandma's, where his brothers and sister were waiting for him. On that sunny evening, his route took him past Westmoreland Street and past the house of Ian Brady, who was by this time dating Maureen's sister, Myra Hindley. David Smith married Maureen in August 1964, with Maureen now 7 months pregnant. And on the night of the wedding, they went home after a short reception, and they hadn't been home long when Myra knocked to ask them to come round and spend time with her and Brady. From this point on, the two couples would meet up every fortnight, where they'd get fish and chips, they'd play cards, they'd drink and listen to music. And as David's relationship with Brady grew, he also began to get on better with Myra, who before the wedding had warned him to look after her sister or else. And life seemed to be on the up for the young couple, as Maureen soon gave birth to their daughter Angela. David managed to secure a new job, and the relationship with his dad improved considerably. Then on Boxing Day 1964, another young local child went missing, 10-year-old Leslie Ann Downey. She'd been at a fair with friends, and they were walking away when she suddenly turned and ran back to the lights and the music of the fairground. But she didn't make it home. David's wife Maureen one night discussed the case with Myra and the large reward offered for information, saying her mother must think a lot of the child. Myra just laughed. The two couples often went to nearby Saddleworth Moor together to talk, to walk, to drink and to play cards. Brady always chose where they went. David couldn't see the attraction of the moor. To him it was bleak and featureless. But after a number of drinks, Brady once told him, "I live for this place, it owns my soul." On one occasion, the four went to the moor late at night when all were very drunk, and as they sat on the blanket drinking raw booze as the sisters chatted, Brady told David about the peace that this place brought to him. He cursed the maggots, as he called them, down in the city. On the 25th of August 1965, the life that David and Maureen were building was shattered by the sudden death of their daughter Angela, aged just 6 months. It was just a normal day, the normal routine, but Angela didn't wake up from her afternoon nap, and Maureen could not wake her. The couple were beyond devastated. On the day of her funeral, as Angela lay in the parlour in her coffin, Myra and Brady arrived at David's house. Myra gave the grieving couple a bunch of flowers and a card saying, "Another little flower for God's garden." In all the time that Myra and Brady had spent with Angela, neither had held her, kissed her, or shown her any affection at all. But on seeing her little body in the coffin, tears briefly filled Myra's eyes. Aware that David must have seen this, Myra quickly told him that Brady must not be told of her display of emotion. Unable to return to their home filled with memories of their daughter, David and Maureen moved to a new house in Hattersley. Now they lived just 100 yards or so away from Myra and Brady, and the couples socialised more than before, though it was always Brady and Myra who dictated what they did. But even so, the relationship was awkward. Myra told David that sometimes he and Brady did not want to be disturbed, and they were either told to leave, not invited in, or asked to wait at a nearby pub until the landing light flashed their signal to come over. Brady had an established way of drawing someone into his world of depravity. He did this with David and previously with Myra. He would recommend literature that moved to more erotic, sadistic texts, such as the Marquis de Sade, writing about murder and sexual cruelty. The aim was to normalise it. One line from de Sade's The Misfortunes of Virtue states, "If crime is seasoned by enjoyment, crime can become a pleasure." A passage that Brady particularly liked said, "Should murder be punished by murder? Undoubtedly not. Murder is a horror, but a horror often necessary." Brady would also often play David tapes of Hitler's speeches, ranting racist hatred, especially after drinking. David was repulsed, but after the death of his daughter, something changed. He was lost, he was vulnerable, he was looking for meaning. Brady saw this and exploited it. Today, we'd probably call this grooming. As Brady felt he had David's trust, he pushed further. Knowing that money was tight, he suggested that he, Myra, and David rob a nearby bank. And shortly afterwards, on a night in when Maureen and Myra were in bed, Brady brought one of his own guns around and pointed it at David, telling him to look at the barrel, and then he pulled the trigger. There was no bullet in this part of the chamber, but Brady had made a point telling David, "That's how easy it is, Dave. You just have to press the trigger. And unbeknown to David at this time, Brady and Myra did debate whether he should be murdered, as Brady had seen a potential flaw in David's character, which could affect their murderous plans. Brady was all for driving him out of Manchester and shooting him, but Myra managed to persuade him not to, as she did not want to cause any upset for her younger sister Maureen. And then came the moment it seemed he'd been leading up to for so long, when Brady told David, "Listen to me, I've done it. I know what it's like. You know what I get from it? Control. You're in control, and that is the biggest high you'll ever have. You can even control death. Do you understand me? It's all a matter of control." Meanwhile, Maureen became pregnant with her second child, and the couple were excited again as they eagerly prepared for the birth. And Wednesday the 6th of October, 1965, was one of those beautiful and crisp, sunny autumn days. At about 11:30 p.m, a dishevelled Myra knocked on their door. Maureen and David were in bed. Myra said she'd forgotten to speak to Maureen about seeing their mum at the weekend, but it seemed really odd she just turned up for that. Myra asked David to walk her home as it was dark and he was asked to go in the house, where Myra flicked the lights on the landing, which she did. But what he saw that night would change his life forever. When he went into the living room when summoned by Myra, Brady was attacking a teenage boy with an axe. Then Brady suddenly stopped and shouted, "Get the dogs away from the blood. Get the things out of it." The boy was by now seriously injured, as Brady then walked towards him and strangled him, until finally his body was lifeless. Brady then stood covered in blood and breathing heavily and said, "That's it, the messiest one yet." The conversation was interrupted by Myra's grandma, who was upstairs and wanted to know what all the noise was. And Myra coolly responded, saying, "It's all right, Gran. I just dropped something on my foot, just go back to sleep." Walking back into the room, she ignored the dead boy on the floor, literally stepping over him, and asking Brady if his ankle was okay. He said, "Yeah, it's fine. I must have caught it, but I'm okay. Can you bring in the cleaning stuff?" Brady put his hand into the wallet of the dead boy. His name was Edward Evans. He was an apprentice in Trafford Park nearby. Edward was just 17, and that night he'd been in the centre of Manchester to watch his team, Man United, playing a Finnish team in a bar. But as he hadn't confirmed the time, his friend wasn't there, so Edward hung around the city for a while before walking to the buffet bar at Central Station, and it was there he met Brady, who invited him back to the house in Hattersley, which he told him he shared with his sister Myra, for a drink. Myra and Brady got sheets and a robe, and Brady and David moved the body to an upstairs bedroom, ready to be moved to Saddleworth Moor the following day. They then cleared up all the human remains from the murder before sitting down with tea and cigarettes, as if the most horrendous murder hadn't just taken place in a suburban house on the outskirts of Manchester. David was terrified at what he'd seen, and he was so scared that if he didn't act normally, something terrible would happen to him. He agreed to return to the house the following morning with Angela's pram to transport the body to the car before disposing of it on Saddleworth Moor. And that is where we started our story today. David Smith testified as a chief prosecution witness at the trial of Brady and Hindley, and he played a key role in stopping their killings and ensuring they both spent the rest of their lives in prison. Hindley died in 2002 and Brady in 2017. Brady and Hindley tried to implicate a number of people, including David Smith, in the murders. It was only in 1987 when Hindley finally admitted that David Smith had been telling the truth. These lies meant that David suffered considerable abuse and violence, as some felt he had to have been involved. He retaliated when he was attacked one time using a knife, and he was jailed for 3 years. Whilst in prison, Maureen left him for another man, and his dad became terminally ill with cancer. He was released in 1972, and shortly afterwards David gave his dying dad a glass of milk, which also contained an overdose of barbiturates. David was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 2 days in prison, but he was released immediately. In 1994, Smith and his second wife, Mary, moved to Ireland where they ran a successful B&B until his death from cancer in 2012 at the age of 64. And what about Maureen? She suffered terrible guilt and anguish, having given evidence against her sister Myra, and her mum never forgave her for it. And many other people never forgave Maureen for being a Hindley. The day after her sister's conviction, for example, she was attacked in the lift of her apartment building when she was 8 months pregnant. Maureen Smith died of a brain hemorrhage at just 34. And even at her funeral, she didn't find peace. Patrick Kilbride, the father of one of the victims, John Kilbride, was at the funeral service with a knife. He kept interrupting during the service, and as the eulogies were being read, there was a blonde woman present, whom he wrongly assumed was Myra Hindley, and he lunged at her with a knife. He was restrained and led away. And Leslie Ann Downey's mum, Anne West, also turned up at the funeral, and also had to be restrained by police when attempting to attack the same woman. So there we have it. In David Smith, we have a man drawn into some of the most dreadful crimes ever committed. There have been so many words written and programs made about why Brady tried to involve David Smith in the terrible crimes that he and Hindley were carrying out, when it was obviously such a risk to involve a third person. Just why, I guess we'll never know for sure, but to me it seems likely that Brady just wanted to extend his reach of control. It was all about control. As I said at the very beginning, David's description of Saddleworth Moor is very apt. Hell's Garden, an abyss where devils play and souls can never rest. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode today. I hope you found it of interest. If so, please do watch one of my other videos. Also, if you could please subscribe, it's completely free of charge, and it keeps me producing totally free content for you every single week. Until next time, I've been Adam Lloyd.